Hello and welcome. This is James from the DSO Imager channel. Today I'm going to give you a review of the Dwarflab Dwarf2. Now a couple months ago Dwarflabs reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in reviewing the Dwarf2. And to be honest, at first I was a bit hesitant. And the reason is because I didn't really see the Dwarf2 or similar devices as something that I personally would be interested in. Those that are familiar with my channel, you know I'm running three deep sky astrophotography rigs with various telescopes on three different equatorial mounts. I have mini PCs running the capture software. My telescopes are out there all night long, unattended, everything running on automation. And typically my pictures have 20 plus hours of total exposure in there. So I didn't think a device like the Dwarf 2 here would really do anything for me. But I gave it like a day or two of thought before responding to Dwarf Labs, letting them know that I would be interested in reviewing this. And I thought about who the target audience of this device is, and I thought of different ways that it would apply to me. And so I'll get into that in the final thoughts of this review. But I think my thought process on this some people might find interesting. So what I'll do from here is I'll cut over to a quick unboxing video. And after that, I'll go over my user experience. And then following that, we'll go and look at some pictures that I've taken with this device. And I really put it through its paces, and I tested it on a bunch of different targets, and I think I can give a good recommendation of the types of targets that this would work well with and targets that it doesn't work well with. And then of course I'll close up with final thoughts. Alright, so let's jump to the unboxing video, and then we'll go from there. Alright, let's do a quick unboxing here. I believe in here are the filters. Yep, so there's the filter holder, and there are the filters. And there's our case. Looks like a shoulder strap. Here's the unit itself. Looks like a battery. Looks like the tripod's in here. Yep. Memory cards. And that looks to be it. All right, now let's talk about my experience using this. I'm not going to go over any kind of detailed specs or how-tos or anything like that. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube that are already uh, really good at showing how to configure this, how to navigate all the menus, technical specifications. So, yeah, I'm not going to cover any of that. I'm just going to talk about how it worked for me. So, right off the bat, it's an extremely easy system to use. I had no problem getting it set up, and I mean, like it's very close to a one-button push. You basically go into the astrophotography menu. You can adjust the camera settings. You can pick a target. The unit will do its own plate solving, and the plate solving I found to be quite accurate in most cases. It's got an autofocus function that works pretty well. So overall, very easy to use. Now, I thought the menu system, navigation and menu system was a little bit clunky, but that's something that can be addressed in future software updates. And Dwarflabs is very responsive to feedback that I gave them. And I'll go over some of the suggestions I made later on in this video. The target selection was very limited. That's definitely one area of improvement. However, it does have an option where you can manually enter the RA and deck of any target you want. So if you have a planetarium type program like Stellarium where you can get the RA and deck information from, you can just plug that in manually. I did try that with one target and it seems to have worked. So yeah, no problem there. I think they just need to update their software a little bit, which my understanding is they're doing a lot of work on that. The camera does allow you to adjust a number of settings, including the gain settings, exposure. Exposure is limited, but I mean that makes sense because this is really an alt-as type of configuration. That said, a few users out there, Quiv the Lazy Geek is one of them, demonstrated how you can basically point this target at Polaris and use it kind of in an EQ mode. Basically, if you put this the dwarf on kind of a wedge setup, you can it'll track in an equatorial style, and that actually addresses a lot of the issues that you have with it. So what's interesting is perhaps if Dwarflabs did some additional tweaking on their software and made a kind of an official EQ mode for it, perhaps that would unlock longer exposures. Because right now the exposures are maxed out at I think it's 30 seconds, and with field rotation, I mean that's really pushing it. You'll definitely want to experiment with the gain settings. And there's also a sharpness setting in there, and I found that increasing the sharpness helped a lot, especially when it came to the stars. Now, let's talk about filters real quick. It comes with 3 filters if you buy it in a package that includes the filters. 2 of the filters are for solar imaging, right? And you have 2 because you've technically got 2 cameras on here. You can see that on the picture here. One is a very wide field camera, and the other one is deep sky. The wide field can help you frame up some stuff, but that only goes so far in the dark. It's far more useful, I think, if you're going to use this camera in daylight, to use that to scan around. The other filter that it comes with is a UHC filter. It seems like kind of like a light pollution filter. I didn't test it out. I've heard mixed things about it. But generally I don't use light pollution filters in where I'm at in a Bortle 5. Now the filter holder that comes with this unit, it is held in place by magnets, and it accepts standard 1 1/4 inch mounted filters. So on a whim, I thought I'd give my L Extreme filter a try and see how this would do with narrowband imaging. And the answer is it doesn't. So I kind of expected this, but I wanted to see how it would work, and I wasn't really crazy about having an expensive filter like the L Extreme exposed to the elements with that filter holder. However, the issue is that you can't expose long enough and you can't increase the gain long enough to get enough stars in the picture to allow it to stack. And so that's your main limitation there. Now, perhaps if I had this set up in a EQ style, and if the software for it has the option to expose for more than 30 seconds, perhaps it might be a possibility. Better yet, I would think a dual band filter with much wider band passes, maybe say something like the L Enhance, combined with running in EQ mode and going with longer than 30-second exposures, that might be an option. That might be an interesting thing. So Dwarflabs, if you're watching this, definitely something to, I think it's definitely worth exploring, because if you can get something like an L Enhance filter to work with a little device like that, it's going to be really appreciative, especially of those that are living in cities or really bad light pollution. Alright, let's jump over to another video clip that I made of me using this device. My camcorder doesn't perform well at all at night, so it's very dark. But the main thing I wanted to show or demonstrate was how the image looks on the phone while it's stacking. And also, I was up on my deck and I had this set up using a Wi-Fi connection. I had it set up in the yard, so I mean it was probably 4 or 5 feet away, and of course a different elevation, about 3 or 4 feet up, and that worked out pretty well. I just left the phone out on my deck rail and just let it run for a couple of hours, and it worked fine that way. All right, so let's take a look at the video, and then we'll come back. All right, I've left my cell phone out here. Dwarf2 is running, so I'm up on my patio and it's raised. I've got there's the Dwarf2. Really hard to see. Moon's on its way up. It's a 96% moon tonight. Anyway, so here's a cell phone. See if this will focus. And you probably can't see that. But right now we're doing 10-second exposures, and this is 32, 33 now. The target is the Swan Nebula, M17. Alright, so here we are in Pics N Site. Now this is a photo editing program that's intended use is astrophotography, and this is the software that I use to do all of my astrophotography on. Now I think it's unrealistic for a brand new user and someone that's just getting in to use with something like the Dwarf2 for them to go out and purchase a copy of Pics N Site. But the goal here is to show you how far you can take it, how far you can take this Dwarf2, and what you can get under the same conditions, using the same techniques that someone would use processing images from a traditional astrophotography rig. Alright, so first target up is the Lagoon Nebula, Messier 8. Now, the Dwarf2 does auto stack. And that's what you see on your phone as it accumulates pictures. It's going to live stack those pictures, and if you leave it running for like an hour, you'll have a pretty nice picture on your phone. You'll be able to see the object as long as it's bright enough. You'll see that object very clearly. So this is the auto stack of M8. Now you see some artifacts here. Right, and this is due to the field rotation, so it's unavoidable in a system. If you ran it in a equatorial style, then you wouldn't see as much of this. If we zoom in to take a look, I mean the stars are a bit on the bloated side. the shape is not, I mean, it's roundish. Focus is pretty tough sometimes to really get it dialed in. This focus here is with the autofocus. You can notice all the stars kind of have this flaring on one side. So I don't know if we're having some kind of collimation issue or tilt, or if this is just a consequence of the system running in Alt-Az. But you can see it's in the same direction for all the stars. But, I mean, we can still clearly see our object here. We can see the Lagoon Nebula here. And so yeah, and when you're looking at this on the phone, it doesn't look, it looks pretty decent. I mean, I have to admit, I didn't think I would be moved too much by it, but it was pretty cool, kind of sitting in the backyard and panning around, and after, you know, a few stacks, starting to see the image form. So it was kind of cool. Now, this picture is made with 10-second subs. I used a gain of 120. I got 418 total subs. Now, I did have to blink through them, and I tossed out a bunch of subs. So nothing new there. The Dwarf2 is sensitive to wind. I mean, I think anything up to 5 or 6 miles an hour is not bad, but on some nights I had this out there, it was like 10 miles an hour or more. And, you know, just like my big rigs, this was impacted somewhat. But anyway, so we got a total of about an hour and 8 minutes in this picture, and I did do a process of it, and that's what I ended up with. So, huge difference between the two, and I think this picture here really shows the potential that you can get with this. Now, to be honest, I was actually surprised that we got as much of the background, the really faint HA as we did here. Color calibration was a kind of a challenge. You do see some gradients in here. Of course, I do have some light pollution in my backyard. I do want to see how this works in a Bortle 1 or Bortle 2 environment. I bet it will do really well. Now, I mean, this is a very small telescope. It's got a very small aperture. The camera is super tiny pixels. So, of course, the image is not going to hold up as well if you zoom in. But, I mean, even here, it's not doing too bad. I mean, it's looking way better than some of my first pictures. Now, granted, if you're brand new, you're not going to be able to process like I did. I mean, I have a few years of experience. But, again, I think it shows the potential that you can do. And M8 is a great target for this. All right, next up, we'll look at M20, which is very close to M8. Actually, let's look at the auto stack first. Now, this is only this is also 10-second subs, a lower gain, a gain value of 100 versus a gain value of 120, because I was trying different things. Only 120 total subs here, so this is like 20 minutes worth of exposure. And this is what I saw on my phone screen. And this is how it came out processed. So again, pretty good. Not quite as good as that M8 image, although the M8 image had 3 times its exposure on there. So I think this is a good example of showing the benefit of getting more time. Now, a fully charged battery is going to get you about 3 to 4 hours worth of imaging. So if you spent the entire time on a single image, you know, you'll have like 1,000 subs, but the results should be pretty decent. Now, I think in practical terms, that's probably not really the best use of it, but we'll go over that at the end of the review, how I think this device is good for. And in the interest of not prolonging this video, I'm just going to blow through some of the other images. So here's a shot of M17. This is the shot that you saw in the experience video, the one that was in the dark. And here's the process job of it. So yes, I am using the technique of removing the stars and processing the image separately and then stretching the stars a little bit. Because, I mean, the theme here, we're seeing bloated stars, and removing the stars and processing them separately and then adding them back is helping a lot. The tools that I used, the software tools I use is Star Exterminator, and I did use Blur Exterminator on this well. Blur Exterminator did a fantastic job taming these bloated stars. Next up, let's take a look at M31. I need to get a galaxy, and here it is. Now, I took a lot of pictures on M31, a lot of subframes, and you can see the stacking stacking artifacts due to the field rotation. But it fit the galaxy just barely. Not a lot of color on it, I've noticed. But I mean, we're seeing some dust lanes. I mean, this is more than you're going to see looking through the telescope, at least in my light polluted skies, right? You're just going to see the center. You're not even going to see any of this here. Now I want to show you another problem that I had here really quick. Let's take a look at this. So this is the galaxy with the stars removed, and you see all these wavy bands of noise. All of this. So this is fixed pattern noise, and we run into this with equatorial mounts. The only difference is instead of being wavy like this, they're all going in straight lines, usually at a horizontal angle. And it's the fixed pattern from the sensor. And really the only way to deal with this is to use a technique called dithering. Now what dithering does is it moves the sensor in the telescope in a random direction a few pixels after each exposure. So it's randomizing this fixed pattern noise, and when you stack it, it eliminates this kind of wavy stuff. With equatorial mounts, we call it things like walking rain and stuff like that. And so dithering is really what's needed to correct this. And I did talk to Dwarflabs about it, and I was told that they were going to include a dithering option in a future update. So if they put that in there and you see that option, you'll definitely want to enable the dithering. It will slow down the acquisition of your pictures a bit, and because these are going to be really short subs anyway, it'll cut down on your total exposure time, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you're going after galaxies. And let me pull up the final processed image. Again, that's the auto stack or the live stack, and this is what I came up with. So it's okay. You can see the artifacts from that fixed pattern noise really bad still. So if they were to add a dithering option, that would help immensely on any target where it's an empty space. So a galaxy, a planetary nebula, right? Those would really benefit from this. We don't really see it in the M8 shot because there's so much background signal in here already from all this HA that it's overpowering the fixed pattern noise. I mean, you can't see it at all in this. But yeah, an image where there's a lot of empty space, it's just very, very hard to hide that. Alright, and last, I attempted the Elephant Trunk Nebula. I wanted to see how faint of a target I could get with this. Now, I mean, again, understand the aperture on this Dwarflab, this Dwarf2 is tiny, right? So the amount of light that it's able to gather is limited. I did not expect it to be able to do anything like dark nebula, especially in Bortle 5 skies. But let's look at this Elephant Trunk Nebula. So here's the live stack image. I mean, we can see some structure in here. I can't really see the elephant trunk itself. You know, I grabbed the RAN deck from Stellarium. I was wondering if maybe that's the head of the elephant, but I can't really tell. Here's what it looked like just stacked from Pics N Site. So, I mean, can't really make anything out. I thought, well, maybe if I pull the stars out, I can see more. And yeah, I mean, I can't tell what we're looking at here. So, I mean, it's not really surprising. Elephant trunk is a pretty faint target, especially in broadband. Usually when you want to image this target, you want to use narrowband. And as I discussed earlier, that's not really an option for this little device. So my recommendation for anyone that gets this is to keep the images or keep the targets on bright targets. So anything in the core of the Milky Way should be good. M16, M17, the small Sagittarius cloud, anything that's bright is going to work. I bet the Cygnus region is going to work really well too. I did shoot the North American nebula with it, but I did that with a full moon out, and it did not come out great at all. I mean, you can clearly see where the Cygnus wall was, and the dust showed up pretty well, but there just wasn't a lot of detail, and that was one of the first targets I went after. So I'm not even going to bother showing that one because I was still kind of learning my way around the device. It was before I discovered the sharpness function and a few other things. I feel confident that if I targeted the North American nebula without the moon, or less than a 50% moon, and I had used the same settings that I used in this picture, it probably would have turned out not almost as good as this one with the same amount of exposure. So I imagine all the stuff around Cygnus would be good, and that's really where you want to be. During the winter, Orion should look great, and the stuff around Orion. Horsehead, that one might be a tough target for this. Horsehead is hard on broadband without a lot of exposure, and of course all in attack is always messing things up. But I bet you'd be able to get a shot at it with this. Alright, so let's do a quick comparison to your typical deep sky astrophotography rig. Alright, so the Dwarflab, very inexpensive. I mean, I have narrowband filters, individual filters that cost more money than the Dwarf2. I think it's right around $400. I don't have the price in front of me, but it's in that neighborhood. They sell it in a package where it's just the unit itself, and then there's a package which I think costs an extra $100. It comes with a few accessories, including an extra battery and the filters that I mentioned. It's very easy to use, extremely easy to use. If you're interested in just getting pictures that you can quickly share on social media without doing any processing at all, just using the live stack picture, I mean, this is a very easy way to do it, right? If we look at these astrophotography rigs that I have here, these are the three that I currently run in the backyard. There's no turnkey option here. They're all separate components. You have to buy the telescope, the mount, the computer, the camera, the filters. You have to put the whole thing together, and then you have to get all the software to talk with everything, and then you have to run it, and you have to manage it, and you have to troubleshoot it when something doesn't work. I mean, it's almost like you have to be an engineer just to run one of these things. Now, of course, if you conquer all the challenges that a traditional rig presents, you're going to get far superior pictures than what you can get with the Dwarf2. But we're talking a lot of money and a lot of time invested to learn how to run this thing, whereas you can take the Dwarf2 on a whim on a camping trip, and then sit around the unit with your friends or family and cruise the night sky. All right, and let's just go back to cost really quick, right? So this guy right here, under $500. All right, so let's use this guy as an example. All right, so that's the Celestron AVX. I think these AVXs are going for around $1,300 today, just the mount itself. The telescope is an ASCAR 65 PHQ. That's $1,000. We have the autofocuser right here. That's $200. Here's our camera. This is an ASI 533 MC. That's an $800 camera. Here's the filter wheel. It's just a 5-position filter wheel, really optional for one-shot color camera. So maybe we can ignore that cost for now. But if you're wanting to continue to add up, it's like I think the filter wheel is like $100 or $200. And then let's see, filters, the luminance filter. I think the Optilong luminance is in there, and I think those are about $50. And then I have the L Extreme in there, and that's like $250, I think. I'm just trying to think about the cost. Right here is a Pics Astro Micro power box. This is what provides power. So I have a main power line going into this, and then this distributes power to all the devices that are on here. And those are a couple $100. There's a little guide scope. All right, so this is the scope that you use for auto guiding on a rig like this, and this was an inexpensive 30mm guide scope, so I don't know, what are they, $50 or so. This is a SV Boney IMX 290 camera, so I think these are about $200 for one of those. And then here's the mini PC, which is what I use to run the whole rig, and it's a Melee Quieter 3, and I think I paid like $250 for it. So that's the cost of my cheapest astrophotography rig, and you know, I mean, that's realistically what you're looking to get into deep sky astrophotography at a minimum. Now there is an in-between option that can take you further than you'll get with one of these. Still costs significantly more, but a lot smaller than that. And that's the option of going with something like a camera tracker and using a small telescope, and then using a DSLR or mirrorless camera if you already have it. All right, so let me give some final thoughts on this unit, the Dwarf2. First, I felt quality was actually pretty good. The unit feels good. It feels well constructed. I don't have any issues with how it's made or how it performs. It performs its function well. Image quality, it's kind of hard for me to say. I mean, compared to a traditional astrophotography rig with, you know, a telescope that's at least 50 or 60 millimeters on an equatorial mount, the image quality, it doesn't compare. It can't stand up to something like that. However, for what it is, I think the image quality is decent. I think the optics are kind of a weak point for it, but given the price, it's not surprising. So I would say for the price, it's what you would expect. It's way better than what you can get from a cell phone, just a standalone cell phone. So I mean, that would be the comparison really to make is if you had something like a cell phone, even if you put the cell phone in a mount so you were not holding it and you tried to take pictures of deep space. In dark skies you can do it. In the Bortle 5 I can get a picture of the Milky Way with my cell phone. It's not a great picture and you can't really see any detail at all. So one of these blows away the cell phone, but it can't compete with a dedicated astrophotography rig. So is this a replacement for a traditional rig? And it's definitely not. It's a completely different price point, and it's a completely different category. Now, who is this for? That's where things get pretty interesting. Obviously, for someone like myself, I wouldn't consider myself a target customer, a target audience for a device like this. And I would think most of my subscribers probably are in the same boat. I mean, we've already got full astrophotography rigs. We've already spent the time to learn how to run them, spent the money to put them together. And we're doing this because part of the hobby is building that rig out and trying different pieces of equipment and swapping out the scopes and trying different cameras. That's all part of the hobby. But what if you're somebody that has an interest in astronomy, has an interest in space, would love to get some quick pictures that they can share on social media. Would love to be able to explore the night sky without having to uh, go through the process of getting a visual telescope, maybe say a Dobsonian, learning how to navigate the sky and all of that. I mean, that's part of the fun there, but not everybody wants to do that. So in that scenario, I think something like this actually fits the bill. I mean, one night I was sitting in the backyard. We had the meteor shower, uh, the recent one. I forgot the name of it. I don't normally chase after meteor showers, but Perseids, I think. So I had a lawn chair sitting in the backyard with the binoculars, and I had the Dwarf2 sitting on the side, and I pointed the Dwarf2 at I think that might have been when I was shooting M8, possibly. But the Dwarf2 was just doing its thing, and I was sitting there and looking for meteorites, and it was a very relaxed time spent outside. And I think that's where the strength is for a gadget like this, is that it's a relaxing way to set up some electronically assisted observations. You know, anyone who's done the traditional rig, you know you've had moments where you're pulling your hair out. Because those aren't easy to work, and when they have problems, those problems tend to cascade. And as I say, those types of astrophotography rigs, they're nothing more than a collection of single points of failure. If just one little component and the whole kit fails, you know, the whole rig's done. So I think someone that's looking for no hassle and wants to get some images really easy, and they don't have high expectations, this will work really well. Now, what are my plans for using this going forward? So I actually sit on a citizen committee that's helping our city go through the International Dark Sky certification process. And we hold a couple of very small star parties. And I think this little device would actually be a very good outreach tool. So I plan to take it to the next star party that's going to be in October. And I bet it does pretty well there. Alright, so that wraps up my review of the Dwarf2. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. If anyone wants to see processing videos, I can certainly follow up with that and show how I process it. The one little thing I'll throw in there is that I am using Pics N Site, so I don't know that that would be too useful for a beginner that is just got one and wants to learn how to process their images, unless they go out and buy Pics N Site. Alright, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and clear skies.